Steve Jobs said mushrooms were one of the most important experiences of his life. Will Smith credits ayahuasca with healing his childhood trauma. Joe Rogan talks about DMT like it's a doorway to another dimension. But what do these experiences actually feel like? Not the mystical nonsense, not the scientific jargon, the real, visceral, sometimes terrifying truth about what happens when you drink jungle medicine or eat the flesh of the gods. Because everyone talks about psychedelics, but almost nobody tells you what the high is really like. This is mushrooms versus ayahuasca. Long before modern medicine existed, people found two things in nature that could crack open reality. The Aztecs called magic mushrooms tionacatl, literally flesh of the gods. They believed eating them let you talk directly to the divine, not just pray to it, but actually have a conversation with it. Imagine you're a warrior who just came back from battle, traumatized, having nightmares. The village shaman would give you the flesh of the gods in a sacred ritual. You'd lie there for hours, and somehow, in ways they couldn't explain but absolutely trusted, the mushrooms would heal your mind. Meanwhile, deep in the Amazon, tribes discovered something even more mysterious. They called it Mother Ayahuasca, the spirit of the jungle who teaches you what you need to know, whether you want to learn it or not. But here's what's fascinating about this. There are at most over tens of thousands of plant species in the Amazon rainforest. Somehow these shamans figured out they needed to combine exactly two plants to create the brew called ayahuasca, a vine that grows wrapped around trees and leaves from a completely different shrub. The odds of stumbling onto this combination by accident are basically impossible. These tribes would spend 3 days preparing for an ayahuasca ceremony, 3 days of fasting, meditation, and mental preparation, because they knew they weren't just getting high. They were about to meet a teacher, a stern, uncompromising teacher who would show them exactly what they needed to heal, even if it was the last thing they wanted to see. Neither of these cultures treated these plants like party drugs for a little fun. They both treated these plants like sacred technology for healing trauma, finding purpose, and connecting with something bigger than yourself. But they both feel completely different. One feels like a gift from the gods, and the other feels like the jungle teaching you a harsh lesson. You'll hear more about what it feels like in just a few minutes. Because if you want to know how it feels to take these plants, you first need to understand how they play with your brain chemistry. Magic mushrooms contain something called psilocybin, but psilocybin itself doesn't get you high. When you eat mushrooms, your body converts psilocybin into psilocin, and psilocin is what actually hits your brain. Think of it like this. Psilocybin is the key, but psilocin is what opens the door. This conversion happens in your gut and liver, and it takes about 30 to 60 minutes. Bodies are literally transforming the molecule before it reaches your brain. Ayahuasca is completely different. It's not one plant, it's two plants working together. The first plant contains DMT. Now your brain already makes tiny amounts of DMT naturally. Scientists think it's released when you dream, maybe when you're born, and possibly when you die. That's why people call it the spirit molecule. But if you just drank DMT by itself, nothing would happen. Your gut produces an enzyme called MAO, monoamine oxidase, that destroys DMT before it can reach your brain. It's like having a bouncer at the door of a club, turning away the very guest you want to let in. So the Amazonian shamans figured out they needed a second plant, the ayahuasca vine, Banisteriopsis caapi. This vine contains MAO inhibitors. These inhibitors basically tell that bouncer to take a break. They shut down the enzyme that would normally destroy the DMT. Now, the DMT can slip past your gut, into your bloodstream, and up to your brain. But because it's traveling through your digestive system instead of being smoked, the whole process takes longer, way longer. We're talking 4 to 8 hours instead of 10 minutes. Now, both psilocybin and DMT are tryptamines. They're chemical cousins, and they both work by hijacking your serotonin system. Your brain has these things called serotonin receptors, specifically the 5-HT2A receptor. Normally, serotonin fits into these receptors like a key in a lock, but psilocin and DMT, they're skeleton keys. They fit into the same locks, but they turn them in completely different ways. When they bind to these receptors, they don't just mimic serotonin. Instead, they activate your whole system. Suddenly, parts of your brain that never talk to each other start having conversations. Your visual cortex starts chatting with your emotional centers. Your memory banks open up and start sharing files with your creative regions. It's like someone removed all the walls in your brain, and suddenly every department is collaborating on the same project. But the timing makes all the difference. Mushrooms give you that dreamy transformation over a few hours. Ayahuasca hits much deeper and doesn't let up for twice as long. Same destination, completely different journey. The way people take mushrooms versus ayahuasca is like comparing a backyard barbecue to a wedding ceremony. Most people take mushrooms alone or with close friends. Maybe you're hiking in the woods. Maybe you're in your living room with your best friend and a playlist of Pink Floyd. The vibe is exploratory, curious, sometimes even playful. You might giggle at the patterns on your wall or spend 2 hours staring at a tree, amazed by how the leaves seem to breathe. They just buy them from their dealer, weigh out a dose, and see what happens. It's become almost casual in some circles. Not reckless, but accessible. Ayahuasca? Completely different world. You don't just drink ayahuasca. You enter into an ayahuasca ceremony, and ceremonies have rules. First, you fast. Not just for a few hours, we're talking days. No meat, no salt, no sugar, no alcohol, no sex. They call it the dieta. Your body and mind have to be clean before you meet Mother Ayahuasca, before she's going to see everything anyway. Then you show up to a maloca, a traditional ceremonial hut, usually deep in the jungle or at a retreat center designed to feel like the jungle. Everyone sits in a circle, the lights go out, and you wait. The shaman isn't just there to hand you a cup and wish you luck. This person has trained for decades. They've done hundreds of ceremonies. They know how to navigate the ayahuasca realm. And more importantly, they know how to bring you back. When the shaman serves the ayahuasca, it's not casual. There's ritual around it. Prayers, intentions, sometimes tobacco smoke blown over the cup to cleanse it. You drink this thick, bitter brew that tastes like liquid tree bark mixed with dirt. Then the Icaros begin. Icaros are traditional songs the shamans sing throughout the entire ceremony. These aren't just random songs. Each Icaro is supposed to guide the experience, protect the participants, and communicate with the plant spirits. Because for the next 6 to 8 hours, you're lying on a mat in complete darkness while the shaman sings these haunting, otherworldly melodies. Other people around you are purging in ways you can't imagine. I'll tell you about that in an upcoming section. It sounds intense because it is intense. You can't just leave if you get scared. You can't turn on Netflix if you get bored. You're committed. The ceremony holds you there until the medicine is done with you. Compare that to mushrooms, where you might decide halfway through that you want to go for a walk, or call your mom, or make a sandwich. Ayahuasca doesn't give you that option. This difference in setting shapes everything about how these experiences feel. Mushrooms feel like a casual exploration, but ayahuasca feels like cosmic surgery. For decades, celebrities who used psychedelics kept it secret, but then a few brave souls started talking, and suddenly everyone wanted to share their stories. Steve Jobs basically credited LSD with creating Apple. He called it one of the 2 or 3 most important things he'd ever done. But it was his comments about mushrooms that really caught people's attention. He said they reinforced his sense of what was important, creating great products instead of just making money. That opened the floodgates in Silicon Valley. Suddenly, tech executives were microdosing mushrooms to boost creativity and problem solving. Companies like Tesla and Google had employees quietly experimenting with tiny doses of psilocybin to enhance focus and innovation. It became Silicon Valley's worst kept secret. Then, Joe Rogan took it mainstream. He talks about mushrooms and DMT on his podcast like other people talk about coffee. With 100 million listeners, Rogan made psychedelics feel less like dangerous drugs and more like tools for exploring consciousness. He's probably done more to normalize psychedelics than anyone in modern history. But ayahuasca attracted a completely different type of celebrity. Sting was one of the first to go public. He traveled to the Amazon in the 1980s and said ayahuasca gave him a profound connection to nature and creativity. Will Smith shocked everyone when he revealed he'd done ayahuasca ceremonies. This is one of the biggest movie stars in the world talking about drinking jungle medicine to heal childhood trauma. Aaron Rodgers credited ayahuasca with winning back-to-back NFL MVP awards. This is a professional athlete at the top of his game saying plant medicine made him better at football. This celebrity endorsement wave did something incredible. It took psychedelics from the fringes and slowly into the mainstream. When A-list actors and Super Bowl champions start talking about plant medicine, suddenly suburban moms are Googling ayahuasca retreats, and tech bros are microdosing on weekends. For 50 years, these plants were basically banned from serious research. Then something changed. In 2016, Johns Hopkins published a study that broke everything open. They gave psilocybin to people who had tried every antidepressant on the market and nothing worked. After one session, 67% of them showed significant improvement. After 2 sessions, that number jumped to 71%. But the best part, the improvements lasted. We're not talking about feeling better for a few days. People were still depression-free 6 months later. Then the floodgates opened. NYU started studying psilocybin for end-of-life anxiety in cancer patients. Imperial College London found that mushrooms could literally rewire depressed brains in ways that traditional antidepressants never could. Yale discovered that a single dose of psilocybin created more new neural connections in 24 hours than months of conventional therapy. That's when the FDA took notice. In 2018, they gave psilocybin breakthrough therapy status for treatment-resistant depression. That's the same designation they give to life-saving cancer drugs. Ayahuasca research started catching up. Studies out of Brazil, where ayahuasca has been legal for decades, showed incredible results for PTSD and trauma. People who had been stuck in therapy for years were processing decades of emotional damage in single ceremonies, all by calming down a certain part of the brain. That part is called the default mode network. It involves that negative voice in your head that won't shut up. Ayahuasca essentially balances this part of your brain for months at a time, but the differences between mushrooms and ayahuasca are becoming clear in the research. Mushrooms excel at neuroplasticity, growing new brain connections. They're showing incredible promise for depression, addiction, and even helping people quit smoking. The research suggests mushrooms help your brain literally grow new pathways around damaged areas. Ayahuasca seems to specialize in trauma processing and emotional healing. The studies show it's particularly effective for PTSD, childhood trauma, and deep-rooted psychological wounds. It's like it gives you the ability to resist painful memories without being overwhelmed by them. Right now, there are over 200 clinical trials studying psychedelics happening around the world. Companies are raising hundreds of millions of dollars to develop these treatments. Oregon has legalized psilocybin therapy, and several other states are following. We're in what researchers are calling the psychedelic renaissance, but we're essentially rediscovering medicines that indigenous people have used safely for thousands of years. The difference is now we understand why they work. That understanding is changing everything about how we think about mental health. Let's talk about what these substances actually do to your body, because this is where the differences between mushrooms and ayahuasca becomes really obvious. Taking mushrooms is relatively gentle on your body. You might feel some stomach discomfort as they kick in, kind of like mild nausea or butterflies. Some people get a little queasy during the come up, but it usually passes once the effects start. Your pupils dilate, you might feel slightly cold or warm. That's about it. Most people can function physically on mushrooms. You can walk around, drink water, go to the bathroom normally. Your body feels mostly like your body, just with some interesting sensations added on top. But ayahuasca, your body goes through hell. They call it la purga, the purge, and it's not optional. Almost everyone vomits, not just once. We're talking multiple rounds of intense vomiting that can last for hours. The shamans actually encourage this. They say you're purging emotional and spiritual toxins along with physical ones, but vomiting is just the beginning. Diarrhea is common, uncontrollable shaking and trembling. Some people sweat profusely, others feel freezing cold. Your heart rate spikes. You might feel like you can't catch your breath. During the peak, many people can't even sit up. You're lying on a mat in the dark with no desire to move while your body processes this incredibly powerful medicine. Some people describe feeling like they're dying, and the shamans just keep singing their Icaros like this is totally normal. The purging can be so intense that retreat centers provide buckets for every participant. Cleanup crews work through the night. It sounds disgusting because it is disgusting. So here's the obvious question. If ayahuasca puts you through physical hell and mushrooms are relatively easy on the body, why would anyone choose ayahuasca? Why would you sign up for 8 hours of vomiting and shaking when you could have a gentle, dreamy mushroom experience instead? The answer comes down to what happens in your mind while your body is going through all of this. Because the physical intensity of ayahuasca is directly connected to the psychological intensity of the experience. That purge, that's not just your body getting rid of a plant toxin. People say they're purging years of trauma, shame, and emotional baggage they didn't even know they were carrying. Which brings us to the real question. What do these experiences actually feel like? What's happening in your consciousness while all this is going on? Because once you understand the difference between a mushroom high and an ayahuasca journey, everything else makes sense. All right, this is what you came here for. What does it actually feel like? Let's start with mushrooms. Imagine the most vivid dream you've ever had, except you're awake and you can remember every detail. Colors become impossibly bright. Not just brighter, but like someone invented new colors and forgot to tell you they existed. The wall in your living room starts breathing, not hallucinating exactly, but like you can suddenly see the life force in everything around you. Your thoughts become fluid. One idea melts into another without any logical connection, but somehow it all makes perfect sense. You might spend an hour contemplating a single leaf, completely amazed by its complexity and beauty. Time stops meaning anything. Minutes feel like hours, or hours feel like minutes. But here's the thing about mushrooms. There's a playfulness to it. You might giggle uncontrollably at how ridiculous everything seems, or spend 20 minutes staring at your hands, fascinated by the fact that you can move these weird flesh appendages just by thinking about it. It's cosmic, but it's also innocent, like the universe is sharing a private joke with you. Your ego, that voice in your head that's always narrating your life, starts to fade. Not disappear completely, but become quiet. Suddenly, you're not thinking about your job or your problems or what people think of you. You're just experiencing pure existence. Some people describe it as becoming one with everything around them. The visuals are spectacular, but dreamy. Geometric patterns overlay everything. Walls might gently melt. You might see faces in clouds or trees, but it feels magical, not frightening, like stepping into a fairy tale written by your subconscious. But ayahuasca, a completely different universe. First, there's no gentle come up. Ayahuasca doesn't ease you into the experience. It throws you into the deep end of consciousness and says, figure it out. Within an hour, you're not in Kansas anymore. The visuals aren't just pretty patterns. They're complete alternate realities. People describe traveling to different dimensions, meeting beings that feel more real than real life, having conversations with deceased relatives or spiritual entities. Some people see their entire life played back like a movie, examining every decision they've ever made. But ayahuasca doesn't just show you these things, it teaches you things harshly. You might be forced to relive traumatic memories, but from a completely different perspective. That fight with your father when you were 12, suddenly you're experiencing it from his point of view, understanding his pain and frustration. That relationship that ended badly, ayahuasca shows you exactly how your own behavior led to its downfall. It's not fun. People describe feelings like they're in therapy with the most uncompromising therapist in the universe. Mother Ayahuasca, they call her, and she doesn't sugarcoat anything. The visions can be terrifying. You might feel like you're dying or dissolving into nothingness. Some people see demons or dark entities that represent their own inner shadows. Others experience complete ego death, the total dissolution of their sense of self. Your identity just vanishes, and you become pure consciousness floating in an infinite void. But even the terrifying parts feel meaningful. People don't describe ayahuasca as a bad trip. They describe it as the most important night of their lives, because whatever ayahuasca shows you, no matter how difficult, feels like exactly what you needed to see. Where mushrooms feel like play, ayahuasca feels like work. Emotional work, spiritual work, psychological work. You might spend hours crying, not sad crying, but release crying, like years of trapped emotions finally finding a way out. The integration is different too. With mushrooms, you come down feeling amazed and grateful, like you just had an incredible adventure. With ayahuasca, you come down feeling like you just completed a PhD in yourself, exhausted but transformed. People describe mushrooms as opening a door to wonder. They describe ayahuasca as being dragged through a tunnel of truth. Both experiences can be life-changing. Both can heal depression, trauma, and addiction. Both can give you a sense of connection to something greater than yourself. But the feeling? The actual subjective experience? Mushrooms feel like the universe is playing with you. Ayahuasca feels like the universe is teaching you. Both change you, but one feels like a dream that you're grateful to remember, while the other feels like meeting a teacher who never leaves you. That's the difference. That's why people choose one over the other. That's why some people swear by the gentle wisdom of mushrooms, while others say they needed ayahuasca's brutal honesty to finally heal. Two plants, two paths, one destination, becoming who you're actually supposed to be.